Hello, this is Monica Reinagel. Welcome to the Nutrition Diva podcast. In last week's podcast, I talked about the Whole30 challenge and what I see as the pros and cons of this very popular program. If you missed that episode, you might want to go back and listen to it now before continuing. In any case, as soon as that episode went live, the emails and the comments started flooding in. Many of you wrote with your own experiences with the Whole30, both positive and negative. But several of you also felt that I had failed to address a key aspect of the Whole30 approach. Henry wrote, "You missed the part of the Whole30 that comes right after the 30 days, which is the systematic reintroduction of the restricted foods back into your diet. I did a Whole30 last year, and during the reintroduction phase, I realized that nightshades were causing a lot of problems for me that I had previously been attributing to other things like gluten or not getting enough sleep. I agree that the diet isn't sustainable, and I wouldn't really ever want to do one again. But I found that the elimination of so many food groups for a period, followed by reintroducing them one at a time, was incredibly illuminating and has definitely changed the foods I eat on a regular basis." Sarah, who did the Whole30 with several of her family members, wrote with a similar experience. "It really bothers me," she wrote, "that the most important part of the program, mindful reintroduction, gets ignored. If you go out for pizza and beer on day 31, then you've gotten nothing out of it except a short-term restriction diet. However, reintroducing wheat, dairy, and alcohol one at a time while paying attention to how your body reacts, well, that's the point. If we'd gone out for pizza and beer on day 31, we wouldn't know that all three of us apparently have non-celiac wheat sensitivity, or that my mother has a previously undiagnosed cow's milk allergy. And we wouldn't know that any form of alcohol triggers middle-of-the-night insomnia for me." Henry and Sarah make a valid point. Completely eliminating certain foods for a period of time and then reintroducing them one by one is a well-established method for identifying food sensitivities. It is, in fact, thought to be far more reliable than those food intolerance blood tests that are marketed to consumers. And I talked about those in episode number 202, which you can find in the archives at quickanddirtytips.com by typing in food intolerance testing. An elimination diet usually focuses on the foods that are most likely to cause adverse reactions. Wheat and other gluten-containing grains and dairy are the most common food sensitivities, and these are among the foods that are excluded on the Whole30 program. Other likely culprits that are often excluded on an elimination diet, such as eggs and nuts, are not excluded on the Whole30. So if you have a sensitivity to one of those, it probably wouldn't be identified. On the other hand, Whole30 does exclude foods such as non-gluten containing grains and natural sweeteners, which aren't usually excluded on an elimination diet because sensitivities to these foods are not very common. It's also not necessary to eliminate foods for 30 days in order to assess sensitivity. 21 days on an elimination diet is considered adequate. Here's what I think is happening here. I think the Whole30 program is attempting to do several things at once to identify food sensitivities, or at least some of them, but also to disrupt and evaluate emotional and behavioral responses to food. And that's something I did talk about a little bit more last week. But as is so often the case, a tool that's trying to do all sorts of different jobs is sometimes less effective, or just harder to use, than a tool that's designed to do just one thing. If you do the Whole30 the way Henry and Sarah did it and carefully follow the protocol for reintroducing some of the foods that you eliminated one by one, you might very well identify food sensitivities that you didn't know about. I noticed that many people posting on the Whole30 forums, however, report that after going through the entire process, none of the foods caused symptoms upon reintroduction. It could be that these sorts of food sensitivities aren't as common as people believe. But identifying food intolerances is not the only reason that people do the Whole30. Another theme of the comments and the conversation surrounding last week's episode was the use of the Whole30 to get your diet back on track after it goes off the rails. And now back to Whole30. If the goal were really just to identify the foods that cause you problems and remove them from your life, you really wouldn't have to do this exercise more than once. And yet, people seem to cycle on and off the Whole30. I think that's because, for better or worse, a lot of people use the Whole30 as compensation for periods of excess. For example, Liza wrote, "It seems like it could be a useful thing to do after the holidays when you've eaten anything and everything. We've all had our good intentions go off the rails. I don't see a problem doing this for a short period of time, once or twice a year, as a way of getting back control." Yes, I think many of us know how it is to feel that we've overindulged and that we need to get back on track. However, you don't have to go to the other extreme of a highly restricted diet in order to do that. All you really have to do is to stop overindulging. The thing that makes me nervous about people using Whole30 or a similar type of program as a correction for quote-unquote bad behavior is that it can so easily set up a sort of binge and purge mentality. Let's say you do the Whole30 as a sort of penance for a period of overindulgence. Well, the next time you find yourself tempted to overindulge, you might also be tempted to strike a bargain with yourself. I know I shouldn't, but after this trip or holiday or weekend, I'll do a Whole30 and make up for it. Having made this resolution, you might go even further off the tracks than you otherwise would. We all have good days and bad days, or weeks, or sometimes even months, but I think it's healthier, both mentally and physically, to try to keep the ups and downs from being so extreme. Because being quote-unquote really good doesn't always entirely undo the damage from being, quote, really bad. There's a lot to be said for trying to hold the line at not so bad, which then gives us the freedom to be content with being pretty good. And that's actually exactly what we work on in the 30-Day Nutrition Upgrade Challenge that just launched this week on Monday night. If you want to do it, but you missed the kickoff, you can still join in. Just register at nutritionovereasy.com, and I'll send you a link to the video recording of the kickoff, and you can jump right in. We'd love to have you. I want to thank you all for the spirited discussion that we had on this topic this week. If you have more comments to share, you can post them on the show's webpage at quickanddirtytips.com or, of course, on the Nutrition Diva Facebook page. So given that you're listening to this, I'm guessing that you are a podcast fan. Well, during the month of March, Quick and Dirty Tips is joining hundreds of other shows to get people as excited about podcasting as we are, and we'd love for you to help. Think of a few shows you love and then reach out to a coworker or a friend or a relative and tell them why they might enjoy it too. For example, I have been telling everyone about my friend Brock Armstrong's brand new podcast, The Workplace Hero. It's for all of us who want to maximize our health and happiness, even though we might spend a lot of hours at our desks and computers every day. You can share your recommendation on social media, and if you do, use the hashtag TRYPOD. That's TRYPOD. And you can also search that hashtag to find some great recommendations. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week.